Hi, my name is Christian Gladu with the Bungalow Company. Today we'll be having another in our series of Google Hangouts. Today's guest is Trevin Duey from Duey Brothers Construction. Trevin and I have been working on several custom bungalow projects in Central Oregon, and today we were just going to run through some of a brief discussion about how to go about pricing a new custom home and some of the steps along the way that can make you reach your budget and not make the construction process an arduous process. Welcome, Trevin.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I'd like to start with is kind of defining two different processes. We have at our company, we have two different kinds of plans. We basically have a stock set of plans, which is a pre-designed plan that you can purchase. It's been built before. There are full documentation, everything you need to build the house. The second part of the design process we have is like a full custom design. The difference between these two is one is starting from scratch, the other is starting from this pre-designed house. Stock plan in our office is around a couple $1,000s. A full custom design, starts $15,000 to $20,000. One of the services the stock plans do provide is we have a study set which can be purchased for $700 to $800. And what's nice about that is it's a document that a builder like Trevin can estimate from the beginning before you go into spending $20,000 worth of design. Currently, Trevin and I have two projects. One is a full custom, and one is one we're working from the stock plan. There's a lot of benefit time-wise to working with the stock plan and also fee-wise. So that's kind of how we're going to base this conversation today. So Trevin, when you maybe we could start with some questions around hiring a custom builder. We have a piece that we forward people oftentimes about choosing a custom builder, and one of the big questions that comes up for us is really, how do you really know what it's going to cost? My feeling is that we spend a lot of time. You spend a lot of time estimating these plans, so we encourage people to interview builders and hire a builder to do a full estimate of the project. We encourage people to pay for that as well, because we all know it takes a lot of time to do these processes. I wonder if you could maybe speak a little bit to kind of the time required for you guys to do an estimate.
Well, in order to do an estimate correctly and get accurate estimates and accurate costs for the whole project, it does require quite a bit of time to do it correctly. The deposit and getting a contractor hired beforehand, it really helps in the fact that it establishes the owner and client relationship, and it brings the builder on as part of the team and enables us to go through and get the bids necessary and put the work into the project that it takes to actually get an accurate estimate. Cost per square foot is I guess a hard thing to nail down without going through the whole process. And in order to actually get a solid bid and solid pricing on a project, it takes a fair amount of time. And by getting a builder on board ahead of time, we're able to go shop multiple suppliers and subcontractors and bring people in and get pricing that's competitive for the market at that particular time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the cost per square foot is always an interesting conversation. I don't know that there's a better way to start the conversation, but I think what we really have come to, I think in both of those projects we're discussing, is it's as much about complexity and level of finish when it comes to creating a budget for the project. We get a lot of telephone calls where we hear people say, what's it cost to build your houses per foot? And I always use the analogy. It's kind of like, what does your car cost per pound? Really depends what's included. Is it got power windows? Has it got 4-wheel drive? Has it got these pieces? I feel like people in establishing a budget, it's one way to establish it is to say, we've got $200 a square foot. The thing I feel like is deceptive is that a kitchen is not $200 a square foot. You know, if you were really, it's probably $400 a square foot, and the living room's maybe $200 a square foot. So I kind of feel like, you know, once we get beyond establishing a budget that they can afford, it kind of takes you and I working together to get there. I think that Conti's project would be a good example of that, and also the Wolf project that we're working on, where everybody has a list of desires and needs, and maybe you could give some examples of how we, some of the type of things we would do to work to the budget.
Yeah, and you know, it comes down to level of customization that each person wants in their home. You know, you can start out with a ballpark cost per square foot and say, okay, yeah, you can do it for X amount, or we can do it for X amount more. What it really comes down to is defining the parameters by which you're establishing that cost per square foot, because there's a lot of things that go into each individual project that really make it difficult to nail that down unless you go through the process that it takes to know what the clients really value and what maybe they value a little bit less, and to put a label on each individual person and what they want. It's really hard, and that's where the discrepancy comes with cost per square foot, because if you're putting, I guess it comes down to, you can't really decide for a person what they value and what they want to put into a home without actually going through that process and having discussions and speccing a house accordingly. You know, another big thing that goes into the costs of a home that really is hard to nail down until you actually go through the process is the site constraints, the site conditions, the amount of rock hammering, and also the way that the house is going to sit on the lot, and CC&Rs, which may require a certain type of exterior detail versus another. So that being said, it is a very slippery subject getting into, you know, just saying you can build something for X amount of square foot, because in the end you need to have this, the houses are all customized for the individual owners, and by putting everybody into one box saying this is going to be perfect for everybody, it's just not possible.
Yeah, and I think that's so true. I mean, and what is covered when people look at an estimate, I think they want to know what's covered in that. I mean, the things I usually see in our business, if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is, and it's usually allowances that are inadequately applied to the project. I would say that our bungalow company study sets there's pretty much everything you need to get from, you know, a flat site all the way to drywall. We have interior details, which can kind of give you a direction for some trim profiles, but really there's still like tile, flooring, cabinets, countertops, all these hard surfaces that still need to be applied. If the builder and the designer are working together to sort out, like you say, what the client's expectations finishes are, is a very crucial part of the project. And I don't know if you would agree with this, but I would say on some of these projects, I would say that by the time we get to drywall, assuming a fairly straightforward site, it's probably somewhere between a third and half of the money goes to the interior finishes.
Agreed. And that is the benefit of going through the full process of putting these costs together, because the plans themselves, they do a good job on the structural, and they can itemize a lot of details for the exterior. But when it comes down to specific products for finishes, the cost can vary so much, and having assumptions of what you're going to put into the house and then having that be a different deal after you get all the way into the process, I guess that just doesn't ever sit well with anybody.
Right. I mean, I think note to the consumer. Really, the reality of this is that if you're looking at estimates apples to apples, really, windows, doors, framing, all that stuff's pretty straightforward for the builder to estimate. I mean, granted, they have to do their homework, but where you'll see the difference and where you have to ask the questions is really at the allowance stage. And the majority of places that we see allowances are on the interior finishes. If they have not been selected prior to bidding, the builder and designer will work together to establish these. What can happen is that a builder might say, hey, these people said $200 a foot, and so they have everything they need to do a really good job estimating the house right up to drywall, but with lack of information and working to the budget, sometimes you'll see inadequate allowances. And I think this is something that backfires in custom builds a lot. People need to understand that really the plans and the specifications become part of the construction contract. If it's not on the plans or in the specifications, you're probably not going to get it, right?
Yeah, you're speaking to the upfront work and the process beforehand. Nailing down the exact cost, it really does take working together with the architect, the owners, and the builder, and going through this whole process and defining, okay, this is our best case scenario. This is what we'd like in this finish. These are alternatives. And if you hire a builder to do this, you should be able to get a detailed cost breakdown with your A choice and then alternatives, A, B, C, and D. And then at that point, you're able to go through this breakdown and be able to customize this to your guys, the owner's desires, and then also to the budget. And then in result, you can tailor the cost with specifications and finishes to meet everybody's desires. And by not doing the process beforehand, you are left with a whole lot of unknowns and lump sums and allowances. And it's just a way you kind of set yourself up for having problems as you go down the road.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. And I think that the other thing that we see a lot of times in the office is people will come back with estimates. Realistically, a really comprehensive construction estimate will contain hundreds of line items. It's not uncommon to get someone to bring a bid back where it sounds too good to be true and there's 10 items on it. I wonder if you could speak to the kind of time and energy it takes, and maybe even the quantity of people you need to talk to create a really cohesive estimate.
In order to do the job properly and to present a breakdown, a cost estimate for a project, you're probably talking to somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 people and getting bids from several different contractors from each specific trade. It's about a 2-week process. By the time it's all said and done, and when things all get put together, you're putting a substantial amount of time into it to get this done.
We also noticed that that estimating process often brings up a good list of questions too. I mean, the plans are as thorough as they can be, but if we hear the same question from the subcontractor or from the builder, sometimes it is an opportunity for us to clarify, go back and either get make sure the bid's covered, but sometimes people will have padded things because there was unclear information. So I think that's a really good, it's part of the collaborative, and that's how we like to think about it. We like to have a builder, you choose a builder, you work with them. We are on the same team. We are all advocates of the process is going on.
Yeah, and it does give us an opportunity to identify any areas within the plan that may yield a little bit higher cost, and maybe there's some alternative ways to put this together. And by enabling us to go through the full process and get several subcontractors and suppliers to get their eyes on this, it enables us to kind of harness the wealth of knowledge that each individual person in their trade or what they're supplying based on fluctuations in the market or different assemblies that may need to be altered, and we can get a little bit of savings and without compromising the design. And it really kind of brings together a collaborative effort to identify, hey, we've done this thing right. We know that every single system in this house has been put together and designed to the best of our knowledge and to the best of the market is doing right now too.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you had a top 5 list of things that people could do to I don't even know if it's save money, but if it were a top 5 list of things to help control the budget, or what would you say to our listeners?
Top 5.
3. I don't know.
One, I guess I would say listen to suppliers and subcontractors and your builder about products to put into your structure and to the house, and I guess listen to the wealth of knowledge of the people that you're bringing in to work with you on this project. 2, itemize your best case scenario, like as far as your finishes and how you want this to look and what products you want to put into the house. Know what you want, but also have a couple other options as far as maybe a little bit lower cost. I guess identify alternatives of products you would want to put into your house or finishes that you'd like to do that would be acceptable, and that would allow us to tailor the pricing more to you and help us to hit a budget if, say, your number one choice is over the budget or it's not going to help us hit where we need to hit. Okay. 3, I would say be open to alternatives. I guess keep an open mind to the different products that would be able to be brought to the table by different people within the business.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of times we'll see a client start to step in and bring in cost-saving measures, be doing some of their own research, which it's good for them to encourage. But in the same breath, it's like if you're working someplace, every area has its unique thing. If you're working in Central Oregon, like we are on some of our projects, you need to know that you can, one, get the product there and also get it serviced and maintained there. Bringing very unique and high maintenance materials to a tough climate like this doesn't always make a lot of sense. It looks like it will save money on paper, but I think to your point, trusting the guys that are out there working with it every day, who have the experience of how this stuff lasts is super important.
Yeah, and you maybe not so much speaking to price, but one of the main considerations is as a home buyer or wanting to build a home, do your due diligence on builders. Figure out who you're interested in working with, and an architect a lot of time has that short list of people that he works with a lot, and then do your own due diligence. Interview with several builders. Get a list of references, check those references, request a sample of a cost breakdown. Just know what you're going to get from the builder, and ultimately you're working with them for over a year, and that's a big deal. You got to be compatible as far as personalities, and knowing that who you hire, you're going to be able to work with, and they're going to produce what you want them to produce. And the only way to do that is do that upfront work and check references and call them and ask those tough questions that maybe aren't so easy to ask, and ask them of the builder. And if they have a problem answering them, that may be an issue, and that would probably be one of the biggest things that I would say.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and I think that point that you're going to be working together. I mean, once the plans are done, and if they're done well, you're going to be working with the builder a lot more than you're going to be working with the designer or the architect. So I think it is really important that communication is clear, and that's a really good question for owners to ask past clients, like what was their line of communication, and also what was the level of supervision on the jobs. I mean, I think this is one of the places where you guys are really elevated compared to the majority of your competition here in Central Oregon, is that you have on-site guys swinging the hammer, on-site guys. I mean, everybody in your crew is works for the betterment of the project, and that is totally evident when you come onto one of your job sites, and those sites are never left alone. And I think that's there's a lot of value in that, and I think that that's a question that people don't often ask, is like, how is two questions? Well, how is the job managed? I mean, is it a cell phone guy that rolls by there, a guy in a pickup truck with a cell phone that rolls by once a day, or is there actually somebody on the job with the ability to make decisions and report back to you guys that is on the same team? I think that, and how that's structured for fee. I know that there's several in the construction contracts we see. Sometimes it's part of the overall percentage of construction, and other times there's an additional fee for that kind of work. So that's another good thing for the consumer to be asking, because it can add up. If it's like, here's the price for the job. Oh, plus in the fine print, it's $55 an hour management time. That's not included in the contract. I think everyone needs to be clear about what they're getting.
Agreed. And another big deal is go see the houses. Go see what the builders you're considering. Take a look at what they've built. Take a look at what they are building. And craftsmanship shows through, and it's something that's not easily quantifiable until you walk through the house and see what they've done. And people can, past clients, they can have a good experience, and there's just a whole lot of things that got to come into place. And usually by the time you go through your process, the right choice is gonna be evident by the time you do your own process. And there is a lot to be said for walking through a house, putting your hand on the trim, taking a look at how the house is built, how it's holding up, and not necessarily just a brand new house. If you've got a house that they've built that's, say, 5 years old, 10 years old, if you can go see those, that's pretty evident with the craftsmanship and what's been put into this. And if the products that were used and the procedures were used, it's got to hold up. So that's a big thing.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. And I think the other thing that kind of ties into this too is, in my side of the industry, on the design side, one of the traps we often see is that people will listen to the design professional around cost. And this is a really dangerous thing. They say, my designer or my architect says that we can build this for so much a square foot. And that's all. That is I think we have a general idea and a general range of maybe the projects we've done last, but I really feel like we have to look at every project specifically. And since we're not signing our name on the construction contract, it's really not our business to quote prices. So I really feel like that working with the builder and not and going through the process of making changes in the design sometimes to meet the budget is a really important thing. You can spend all the money on design and have nothing to show for it but a set of plans, unless you've had the builder engaged in the process, going through the plans. I mean, I'm thinking when we did the Wadsworth project, I remember one morning we were looking at the different roof things and different roof options, metal, comp, all this stuff, fascia, and we were sitting in a meeting, and you said, I'll take a look at that, and you emailed me an hour later with like, okay, it's going to be this much per square foot more for metal. It's going to be this much per square foot more for metal fascia or linear foot for fascia, and we were able to make some decisions on that project, and we could tell the client that and move forward with that, and they were on board, not just a surprise. Hey, it's $100,000 over budget.
Yeah.
So I think that really embracing the collaborative is between the design and building is the only way to get these houses built. Nobody wants to draw a set of plans that they don't get built. Nobody wants to buy a set of plans that aren't going to get built, and nobody wants to estimate one. So, for the consumer, really leaning into the idea that you have this design, you have this general sense of what this is going to be, and understanding that it's going to be a negotiation and a process to get what you want. And spending more money also doesn't always make the project better. I think especially with some of the bungalows that we do, sometimes it's less is more in terms of what you actually put in the houses. A simple trim detail, straightforward colors, good standard windows, things like that kind of help make those somewhat affordable.
Yeah, and the big thing on our end of it is putting in products that work well in the climate that we live in, and only a builder who builds in that specific climate that has experience with homes can have that type of experience to say, hey, we need to put this product on the exterior of the house instead of an alternative, maybe a less expensive alternative. And that's, it's kind of another one, speaking to cost per square foot and how it can be a kind of a tough target to hit, just because by the time you go through and make all those decisions, and listening to your architect, listening to your builder, and saying, okay, this is what we can do, and here's your options. So say your exterior trim can be X amount of money for this product that's a little bit inferior. Yes, it's going to get by code. It's going to look really good through the warranty period of the contractor. But in 10 years down the road, you want to know that you made that decision to put the right product in, and you're still not having problems with it, and it's looking good and performing well, far beyond the warranty period or far beyond your expectations. And those are the decisions that need to be made throughout the process. And maybe it's a case where if you're building your home, you don't value that. You can say put a lesser grade of paint because it's going to save a few $1,000s. But I guess the whole point is to have that information in front of you, know what the costs are, know what the trade-offs are, and have a builder that's willing to explain these things to you and help you to make the best decisions possible, so you're happy with your purchase for years down the road, and you have no regrets.
Right. So another thing I'm kind of interested in is when you do an estimate, how long are these bids good for usually? By the time you do the estimate and and everyone agrees on the price, how long do the subcontractors and suppliers usually hold that pricing?
Well, the fine print on a lot of bids, is a lot of times 30 days, 60 days. Yeah, I guess the reality of it is usually in a building cycle. I mean, when you approach a subcontractor or supplier, and okay, we get a price for the work that needs to happen with the expectation, say it's going to be starting in 6 months or 12 months. For the most part, for the building cycle that you've determined that, hey, this project's going to happen in, that's typically how the pricing stays good for. As far as, say, I know lumber's a big one that fluctuates a lot. It's up and down, and it's really hard to predict where that'll go. One thing that we like to do is say we get the project moving forward, but there's certain products that tend to be a little more volatile, and you're not too sure where they're going to be. Say you break ground 6 months down the road, you don't need the product for like another 6 months. That's one instance where it makes sense where, okay, well, we want to make sure the pricing gets held as close to what our original bid was as possible. So there's certain products, sheet goods for one example, your floor sheathing, roof sheathing, wall sheathing, that type of stuff has a long shelf life. It is very volatile, and in that case, what we'll do is we'll talk to our suppliers and say, hey, all right, we're under construction, and we want to buy this chunk of product. We don't need it for another 6 months, but we want to buy it when it looks like the market's going to be working for us the best. And that's one of the things that helps us to avoid a lot of these overages as prices fluctuate. But as a rule, some subcontractors' pricing not necessarily affected by the commodities that they're supplying. It's usually good for the building cycle or the time frame that you're expected to build in. If you go too far out past 6-8 months, at that point you really need to go through and verify the pricing and sometimes all that takes is a phone call or an email and saying, hey, all right, we still good on this. And as a rule, that people don't make money unless they work, and yeah, it's a constantly fluctuating deal. But that's speaks to another reason to hire competent and well respected and trusted subcontractors and suppliers.
Yeah. So here's another question too. When you go to do when you get this initial set of plans, and you come up with an estimate, is there a specific type of contract that you recommend an owner sign before they're signing a contract for the full construction, like for this pre-construction stuff? Is there a way you guys like to go about that?
So as a rule, we'll take a down payment, a pre-construction deposit, essentially, for basically initiating the relationship between the owner and the builder. And basically what that does is that gets us on board for, okay, so we're blocking out a time frame to build your home based on what the parameters of the project are. That deposit, typically about $5,000, is a refundable deposit. Basically, it's an advance on the overhead and profit fees for the job. So basically, it engages us. It knows that, okay, we're serious. We're part of the team. We're going to work with the owners and the architect to define all the finishes, to cost this thing out, to work through the design process, get this thing. Basically, it's adding us to the team, enabling us to be able to do the work that's necessary up front to move the project to the construction phase. Once the construction starts, after the first month's work that's completed, it's shown as a credit on the first invoice from us. And I guess it's just a way of ensuring that we can put aside a spot in our schedule and that everybody's serious about going through. In the event that the project does not happen for one reason or another, at that point, that the deposit is non-refundable. So we keep that, and it essentially pays for the time. Well, it pays for part of the time that we put in through the pre-construction end of it, getting this thing to go to the build.
Yeah, it seems like pretty good insurance. If someone's talking about building a $500,000 or more house, it seems like a pretty good thing to invest in, to know that you can afford to build the house for sure. How about cash on hand in terms of contingencies? This is something that we've had come up quite a few times with people. It seems to be that there's some specific things that sometimes the construction lenders don't like to lend on. So we advise the clients often to say, I guess I'll preface it like this: I don't care how much money you have. Usually, building a house pushes you to the edge of it at some level. So I always encourage people to understand that windows, cabinets, anything custom like that often takes a pretty good sized deposit. So I encourage them to have some money on hand to deal with some of those deposits, because I've run into quite a few situations where people have dumped all their money into this construction project, and the lender doesn't want to advance money for 50% of the cabinets. Maybe you could talk through that process a little bit.
Well, I mean, I guess just with the same thing we're talking about of going through the process and finding the builder you want to work with, I think the same holds true for finding a lender that's most willing to work with what your parameters are. If it's a case where, agreed, having a fair amount of capital on hand to pay for the deposits and pre-buy the lumber like we were talking about earlier, that definitely has its advantages. But I have worked with lenders on jobs where that is part of their process, and that's part of their program, is they are willing to pay for upfront deposits and things that need to be bought for the project. So, that is lender specific, and that would be a very important question to be asking your lender before you decide on who to use for your financing.
And probably really folding the builder into that too, because I know that I also see it a couple of different ways. I know that some of the projects we work on in the East, I see a little bit different. They pay by performance once it's completed. Like they won't pay for any framing until all the framing is done. And I know that out here, usually it seems like, there's a draw against that line item, and you get paid for the amount the percentage that's been completed over that month. Is that generally how you guys do it?
Yeah, that's generally when a lender's involved, that's typically how it's done. The progress that's completed during a month of work, usually the inspectors come out on a monthly basis, and they'll pay for percentage complete on a line item. But again, on lenders that we have worked with, they have understood that certain products need deposits, and it's just a matter of deciding which lender is going to work with you the best. Yeah.
So for the people out there listening, part of the process really is that once a builder like Trevin makes a draw, submits for a draw every month, the bank will send out an inspector, and they'll say this much materials here, this much labor is done, and that's really important for you guys that are having the house built, so that that basically you're paying for what's been done, and neither the builder's ahead of you nor are you ahead of the builder in terms of finances on the job. And I guess maybe during the recession we had a couple of these things come up too, where around lien releases. I wonder if that's something that always seems to take people by. Sometimes people will get a copy of a lien release and they'll freak out. And maybe you could speak to a little bit how that works and why that's important for the consumer as well.
Well, it's a process that we've incorporated in our monthly processing, and essentially what it is any supplier or subcontractor that supplies anything for the house, they send out notices of right to lien to the owners, which is basically saying that, okay, we've started to provide labor or products or services on this project. And by sending this, basically it's a notice saying, okay, we've provided this. If we don't get paid, we have the right to put a lien on your house, which when it comes certified mail, and it's something that's required by law for all these suppliers and subcontractors to do in order to, I guess, have recourse if they don't get paid for what they're doing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I guess in a worst case scenario, so you pay your builder X amount of money on a monthly basis, and just having assurance that the money that you paid your contractor is going to where it actually needs to go, to where it is owed on that project. Right. So on a monthly basis, one big thing, and that's another question to ask when you're interviewing builders, is how you deal with lien releases. And personally, how we deal with it is on a monthly basis. We'll provide an itemization of every supplier or subcontractor that has provided that has sent out an invoice to us for your specific project. So we send out a bill itemizing this. Okay, we have suppliers and subcontractors here that we are billing you for. What we do is we send out a lien release to all of the suppliers and subcontractors, basically saying, okay, we've the subcontractor signs it and sends it back to us saying, okay, for up to this date, we've been paid in full for the amount of work that's been put into this project. Mm-hmm. And it's been signed. And at that point, we collect all those, we send them to our owners on a monthly basis. So essentially it's assuring that the money that you pay to your contractor is actually going to the subs and the suppliers that have a right to lien on your property, and it assures that there will be no liens put on your property. And at the end of the project, there'll be a final lien release basically saying, okay, this project's complete. I've supplied X amount for your project. We release all rights to lien. We've been paid in full. And that's just some assurance. And it takes a fair amount of time on a monthly basis. But as far as from a contractor standpoint, it's just good business. And it assures that the contractor is not using your money to fund other projects or taking it or whatnot. Because it's your only assurance that your money is going where it needs to go. Yeah,
exactly. Well, Trevin, this has been great today. I appreciate taking time out of your day and doing this. And maybe we can do it again. I got a couple other ideas.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, Christian.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Trevin.